The throne room of Vethra Prime shimmered with cold light, its marble pillars carved from the bones of extinct stars. Every inch of the place whispered of power older than memory. Yet beneath that grandeur, there was a pulse, an unease the courtiers could not hide. They stood in neat rows, armor gleaming like obsidian ice, faces masked to conceal fear. For they were in the presence of their queen, and even silence trembled for her. Queen Seraphine of the Obsidian Crown sat upon her throne of living metal, motionless yet impossibly alive. Her skin, smooth and pale as starlight, shimmered faintly with frost. Her crown burned gold against the blue-black of her hair, a sharp contrast to the crimson hue of her lips. She was perfection sculpted by galaxies, beauty that demanded reverence and punished hesitation. I'd seen her only from afar before this moment, when I'd been dragged before her guards, accused of espionage. But standing there now, meeting those silver-white eyes, I felt something entirely different. She didn't speak at first. The room held its breath. One of her guards, armor sleek and dark, stepped forward, his voice sharp as a blade. "This is the human we captured near the northern spire, Majesty. He was found trespassing within the translator vault." Her gaze flicked toward him. "And yet," she said, her voice melodic and cold, "he still breathes." The guard bowed quickly. "He claimed ignorance of our laws." "Do you believe him?" she asked. "No, my queen." "Then why?" she said softly, rising from her throne. "Do you bring me lies when you should bring me truth?" The guard stammered. Before he could answer, she gestured slightly. The air shimmered and he was gone. Not dead, not destroyed, simply erased from existence. The energy he had been scattered into nothing. The hall grew still again, save for the faint hum of the queen's power fading into the air. I should have fallen to my knees. Instead, I found myself speaking. "You didn't have to do that." Her head tilted, her eyes narrowing slightly. "And yet I did." The words left my mouth before I could stop them, driven by fear, or perhaps something far more reckless. "He was just doing his job." The court gasped. No one spoke to her that way. No one survived it. She stepped closer, her armor whispering against itself. Up close, she was both terrifying and mesmerizing, her every movement measured and precise. "You speak boldly for a condemned man," she said. "Perhaps humans do not fear as they should." "Maybe we just fear the wrong things," I said. Her eyes gleamed with faint amusement, or was it curiosity? "Wrong things. Like dying before we've said what mattered." That made her pause. The faintest crease appeared between her brows. "You speak our tongue," she said slowly, studying me. "Fluently." I blinked. I hadn't realized until now that I was speaking in her language. The words had come naturally, their cadence alien yet familiar. I swallowed. She cut me off, her voice trembling now. "No human has ever spoken the tongue of Vethra. Cannot be learned, it is inherited." She stepped even closer, so near I could see the faint energy currents moving beneath her skin. The light in her eyes flickered, not with fury this time, but with something far more fragile. "Who are you?" she whispered. I didn't know what to say. The truth was that I didn't know how it happened. I'd been sent here as a linguist, part of a failed expedition to make first contact. Our ship had crashed on the outer moons. The rest of my team had either died or been taken. I'd wandered for days before the guards found me. And now, somehow, I was speaking like I'd been born under her stars. "I don't know," I said finally. "I heard your people's voices in my dreams before I woke here. Words that weren't mine." Her breath hitched, a sound no one else in the hall dared to make. She reached out, fingers trembling as if to touch my face, then stopped herself. "That's impossible," she said softly. "Our dreams are bound to the source. To share them would mean—" She didn't finish. Instead, she turned sharply to the guards flanking her. "Leave us." "My queen," one began, but her gaze silenced him instantly. When the hall was empty, she faced me again. The strength in her voice wavered for the first time. "Say something," she whispered. "Anything." In my language. I hesitated, then repeated the first phrase I remembered from the dreams. Ether valen esse ray. The color drained from her face. Her lips parted slightly. Do you know what you just said? I shook my head. Her voice trembled as she translated. It means, I see you as I once was. A shiver rippled through her, her armor humming faintly as if reacting to her pulse. Those words are forbidden. They belong to the first memory, the moment when we were still mortal. Only the royal blood can speak them without burning. But I didn't burn, I said quietly. She stared at me as if seeing something impossible. No, she whispered. You didn't. Silence stretched between us, filled only by the faint hum of her power. Then she asked, almost to herself, Are you one of us? I'm human, I said. Whatever that means to you. Her gaze softened, confusion flickering behind her poise. Humans are not supposed to dream our dreams. And yet, you spoke as one of the Sourceborn. What does that mean? I asked. Her eyes darkened. It means the Source remembers you. She turned away, walking toward the throne again, but her steps faltered halfway. If this is true, she said softly, then my entire world is a lie. I took a step forward. Then maybe it's time to rewrite it. Her head turned slightly, the faintest spark of a smile ghosting across her lips. You speak like someone who doesn't understand the cost of change. Maybe not, I said, but I'm standing in front of someone who does. Her eyes met mine again, and this time, they weren't the eyes of a goddess. They were the eyes of someone terrified. You've bound yourself to something ancient, human, she whispered. Something that will not let you go. I exhaled slowly. Then neither of us is free anymore. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no sound came. The faint shimmer in her eyes deepened, the same tremor that had carried through her voice moments before. I don't even know your name, she said softly. Ilir, I said. Ilir, she repeated, her voice like a prayer. Then hear me, whatever the Source has made of us, it is not done yet. The air thickened, the golden light of the hall flickering as if reality itself was listening. The days that followed blurred together like fragments of a dream too vivid to forget. I wasn't imprisoned, not exactly. Queen Seraphine had ordered me contained, which meant I was confined within the palace's inner citadel. It was a labyrinth of crystal corridors and living light, where walls shifted imperceptibly and every step carried the faint vibration of unseen machinery breathing beneath the floors. The Vethari didn't build their palaces as places of stone. They grew them, coaxed from metal that remembered stars. And through it all, her presence lingered. Even when she wasn't there, I could feel her watching. There was a rhythm to her awareness, a soft pressure in the back of my mind, like standing beneath a waterfall of sound just below hearing. Sometimes, I thought I heard her voice whisper my name. Not aloud, but deep inside, where language had no shape. The guards treated me with cautious respect now. They no longer called me intruder. They called me Kareth Voss, something halfway between guest and omen. When I asked what it meant, no one would tell me. Seraphine summoned me again on the fourth day. The same hall as before, though it felt changed now. The air pulsed warmer, as if the great chamber itself remembered what had passed between us. When I entered, she was standing not on the dais but on the floor, among her attendants, closer, human almost. Her armor gleamed under the high lights, the dark metal etched with gold veins that pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. Ilir, she said, my name rolling from her tongue like a forgotten melody. You've eaten, I hope. Enough, I said, though I'm still not sure what half of it was. A faint smile touched her lips. Sustenance is rarely kind to the unfamiliar. I've noticed, I said dryly, that earned a low laugh from her attendants, a sound that died the instant her eyes turned toward them. Silence reclaimed the hall. Then she gestured for me to follow. Walk with me. We moved through a series of archways that opened into the palace's heart, a massive observatory whose ceiling was one vast pane of crystal, revealing the cold splendor of the stars above. Ships glided in the distance, their lights like drifting embers against the void. This place, she said softly, was built when our people still believed the universe had edges. They thought if they reached far enough, they could touch the source itself. The source, I repeated. You mentioned it before. She nodded, her gaze distant. It is what we were before we became this, before the armor, before the power. The first flame that remembers us. It gives life. It gives memory. And it keeps both on a leash. I studied her profile, the way the pale light painted her silver eyes. And you think the source remembers me? I know it does, she said. You spoke words lost since the first memory. Even I cannot utter them without pain. But I don't even know what they mean, I said. Perhaps that is the point, she murmured. The source does not choose by reason. It chooses by need. We stopped before a massive structure. A sphere of liquid light suspended above the floor, its surface shifting through patterns that hurt to look at. She turned to me, her expression unreadable. This is the heart of Vethra. Every thought, every life on this world passes through it. If the source truly remembers you, it will show us why. The guards at the edge of the chamber stirred uneasily. One of them spoke in a low voice. Majesty, this is forbidden. So is ignorance, she replied coldly. Leave us. They obeyed, though I could see the fear in their eyes. When the room was empty, she turned back to me. Step closer. I hesitated. What happens if I touch it? Her lips curved faintly. You will either see truth or burn. Comforting. I didn't summon you for comfort, human. I exhaled, then stepped forward. The sphere pulsed, reacting to my presence. The air thickened, humming like the moment before lightning strikes. I reached out a hand, and the light swallowed me whole. It wasn't pain. It was memory. I saw flashes, worlds burning, cities falling, voices in a language that wasn't words but meaning. Seraphine, not as a queen, but as something else. Flesh unarmored, eyes filled with wonder instead of command. She stood beside me in that vision, reaching toward a star that split open like a flower, spilling light that poured into both of us. And then fire. I staggered back, gasping, the chamber spinning around me. The queen caught me before I fell, her hands steady and cold against my skin. What did you see? She demanded. You, I breathed. And me. But it wasn't now, it was before. Long before. Her eyes widened. Describe it. We were standing together on a world of light. The sky broke open, and something passed through us. It felt alive, like it knew what we'd become. Her breath trembled. The convergence. What? The first flame, she whispered. The moment the source divided itself into mind and flesh. Our ancestors spoke of two who stood at its center. One to bear the memory, one to carry the will. She stared at me as if the universe had just whispered its secret. You shouldn't exist. Story of my life, I muttered, but she didn't smile. If this is true, then your presence is not chance. You are the echo, what was lost when the source split. I frowned. You're saying I'm some kind of reflection? Not reflection, she said softly. Reunion. The light around the heart flared suddenly. Energy coursed through the floor, surging between us like invisible lightning. My hand brushed hers, and the pulse froze. Time itself seemed to still. For an instant, I wasn't seeing her as she was now. I was seeing everything, her fear, her longing, her burden, the centuries of rule, the loneliness of power, the unspoken ache of being worshipped but never known. Beneath all of it, a single thought pulsed like a heartbeat through her mind. Don't let this be real. When the light dimmed, she pulled her hand away sharply, as though burned. This changes everything, she said. For better or worse? I asked. Her voice was quiet, but her eyes blazed. For both. She turned from me, her armor whispering in the silence. You will remain under my protection until I decide what to do with you. If the source calls you back, we will answer together. I hesitated, then said softly, Seraphine. She froze at the sound of her name from my lips. Whatever the source wants, I said. We don't have to let it decide who we are. For a moment, The Queen of Vethera looked at me. Not as a ruler, not as a divine figure, but as someone searching for something she'd thought long dead. "You still think choice is stronger than destiny?" she asked. I met her gaze. "I think destiny's just waiting for someone stubborn enough to argue." She almost smiled. Almost. Then, with a whisper of gold and shadow, she turned away. "Then argue well, human," she said, her voice fading into the hum of the heart. "Because the gods will not forgive either of us." The following night bled into silence, a silence heavy enough to feel alive. The palace that had once throbbed with movement now seemed to hold its breath, the corridors dimly lit by veins of gold light pulsing through the walls. I had been moved to a higher chamber, a suite overlooking the great spires of Vethera Prime, where the city spread like a sea of glass and shadow beneath twin moons. It should have been beautiful. It should have felt like awe. Instead, it felt like waiting. The source had shown us something neither of us could explain. Seraphine had vanished into seclusion afterward, leaving her court in quiet panic. Even the guards stationed outside my door looked uneasy, their polished armor reflecting candlelight that seemed too fragile to belong in a place like this. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the same flash. Her hand reaching toward mine, that moment of connection when everything else dissolved. It hadn't just been a vision. It was recognition, the kind that burned deeper than memory. When the door finally hissed open, I wasn't surprised to see her standing there. She was no longer in ceremonial armor. Instead, she wore a sleeveless tunic of obsidian silk that clung to her like liquid shadow. Her crown was gone, her long braids unbound. Without them, she looked younger, less queen, more ghost. "I thought you'd be asleep," she said quietly. "I thought you didn't visit prisoners." She gave a faint, humorless smile. "You're not a prisoner. Feels like one." Her gaze lowered, and for a heartbeat, I thought I saw guilt flicker there. "You're under protection," she said softly. "There are those who would rather you disappear before I decide what your presence means." I met her eyes. "You mean your priests?" Her lips tightened. "They believe you are an echo of the source's corruption, that you will unmake the balance we've maintained for millennia." "And you?" I asked. "What do you believe?" For the first time, she looked uncertain. "I believed the source was perfect," she said, "until you spoke its forbidden words." She turned toward the window, the moon's silver glow tracing the contours of her face. "When I was a child, my tutors told me stories of the convergence, that two beings touched the flame and divided eternity between them. One became light, the other became voice. But voice was mortal. It burned itself away so light could live. I joined her by the window, watching the reflection of her pale eyes in the glass. "You think I'm the voice?" She shook her head. "I don't think. I feel it." A quiet filled the space between us, thick with questions neither of us could ask without changing everything. Finally, she said, "There is something I must show you, but you must promise. No matter what you see, you will not turn away." I nodded. "You already know I'm too curious for that." Her mouth curved slightly, though her voice stayed low. "Then come." She led me through a passage I hadn't seen before, narrow, spiraling downward into the palace's roots. The air grew colder as we descended. The glow from the walls dimmed until only her presence lit the path, a faint silver radiance bleeding from her skin. At the end of the corridor stood a pair of massive doors, carved from black stone etched with symbols that shimmered faintly when she approached. "This is the sanctum," she said. "No outsider has entered it since the first era. And yet you're bringing me in." Her eyes flicked toward me. "Perhaps that makes you less an outsider than I thought." The doors opened with a sound like thunder drawn through water. Inside was darkness. Not the absence of light, but a living thing, swirling and whispering, vast and ancient. At its center floated a crystalline shard suspended above a pool of liquid silver. I felt its pull immediately, as though gravity itself bent toward it. Seraphine's voice was quiet, reverent. "The source's heart, the fragment that fell to our world when the flame split. It is what gives my people their power, and what binds them to its will." I stepped closer, feeling the hum vibrate through my bones. It's alive. Yes, she said. And it is watching. I turned to her. You mean now? She nodded once. It listens. It knows what you are. Before I could speak, the shard pulsed, sending waves of light rippling across the chamber. A voice, not hers, not mine, filled the air. It wasn't sound. It was pure meaning, pressing directly into my mind. Return, it said. The halves must be whole. Pain lanced through my skull. Images flashed. Flame, shadow, her face dissolving into light, my hand reaching through eternity. I fell to one knee, gasping. Seraphine knelt beside me, her hand gripping my shoulder. What is it saying? She demanded. It wants... I forced the words out. It wants us to merge. Her eyes widened. Merge. Reunite, I said. The light and the voice. The source wants to make itself whole again. She drew back as if struck. That would destroy us both. I know. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The shard pulsed again, brighter this time, its hum rising into something like a heartbeat. Seraphine's expression hardened. I have ruled by the sources will all my life, she said quietly. It gave us strength, but it also chained us. If we obey this, we cease to exist. And if we refuse? I asked. Her eyes met mine, silver fire blazing within. Then we defy the gods. The shard flared again, the chamber trembling. I heard the voice a second time, sharper, impatient. Return, or be unmade. Seraphine rose to her full height, armor forming around her like living metal. No, she said aloud, her voice echoing through the hall. We have been your servants too long. The shard's glow intensified, the liquid silver boiling. A tendril of light lashed toward her, and instinct moved me before thought did. I threw myself between them. The impact was fire and void all at once. Pain so vast it broke into silence. When I opened my eyes, the world had changed. The chamber was gone. The walls, the pool, the shard. Everything dissolved into a vast white plain stretching into infinity. Seraphine stood beside me, her breath ragged, her eyes wide. We're inside it, she whispered. The voice returned, no longer booming but intimate, all around us. Why resist what you are? Seraphine's hand found mine. Because what we are is not yours to command. You were born of me, the voice said. You exist to complete me. Maybe once, I said, but not anymore. The light shuddered around us. I felt it trying to pull us apart, unraveling us into threads of energy. Seraphine's grip tightened painfully. Elior, she said, her voice breaking. If it takes me, it won't. Listen to me, she shouted, her voice cracking through the void. If it takes me, you must sever the link. End me before it claims both of us. I met her eyes. No, there's no other way. Yes, there is, I said. We choose. She stared at me as though I'd lost my mind. You think choice can undo creation? I smiled faintly. It's undone worse. The voice grew louder now, furious. Return. The plane around us shattered into light. I felt the pull again. Stronger this time, trying to rip us back into it. I reached for her, every part of me burning. Our fingers met, and the universe stopped. Everything the source had been, its rage, its memory, its hunger, collapsed inward, spiraling around us like a dying star. I didn't fight it. I just held her. And for the first time since the beginning of everything, the source hesitated. Then it fractured. The light broke apart into 1,000 motes, fading into the dark. The hum was gone. The silence that followed wasn't death, it was freedom. When the world reformed, we were lying on the floor of the sanctum, the shard dim and lifeless above us. I turned to Seraphine. Her eyes fluttered open, no longer glowing but human. Almost. What did we do? I whispered. She smiled faintly. We taught a god to listen. The days after the sanctum felt like the pause between heartbeats. A silence stretched so thin it hummed. The source was gone. Not destroyed, not dormant, gone. The Vethari called it the dimming, and across their cities, light faltered for the first time in recorded history. The skies turned a pale gray that had no sun or stars. The power that had fueled their world for millennia simply ceased to answer. First, there was panic. The high priests declared an eclipse of faith. The armies gathered in confusion. The scholars argued over prophecies none had truly understood. But beneath all that chaos, something else stirred. Something quieter. For the first time, the people of Vethera could no longer feel the source inside their blood. The divine silence frightened them, yes, but it also freed them. And at the heart of it all, Seraphine and I stood in the ruins of what had been worshipped. The sanctum's doors had been sealed by her command. Only we and a handful of loyal guards knew the truth of what had transpired there. The priests clamored for her to perform the renewal rite, a ceremonial act meant to reignite the source's light. She ignored them. She hadn't worn her crown since that night. The gold of it sat untouched on her throne, dim as old memory. "You look tired," I said quietly. She stood by the same window where we had once looked out over the twin moons, though now only one remained visible, a pale scar in the mist. Her hair, once braided with silver filaments, hung loose around her shoulders. The light in her eyes had dulled, but there was something deeper there now, awareness. "I am," she said softly. "For the first time in my life, I can feel the weight of my own heartbeat. It's heavier than I expected." "You could rest," I suggested. "Let your people rebuild without you for a while." "They would tear each other apart," she said. The source held more than power. It held order. Without it, every fear will demand a throne. I joined her at the window. Below, the streets were no longer glowing veins of light but dark rivers dotted with torches. Fragile human flames. The sight made something ache in me. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing," I said. "They're learning what it's like to live without gods." Her gaze turned to me, searching. "And what of you, Ilir? What are you without the source?" I smiled faintly. Still human. Still guessing. She exhaled a soft, disbelieving laugh. "You make it sound enviable." "It is," I said. "We get to make mistakes and mean them." She fell silent for a long time, her eyes drifting back to the city. When she spoke again, her voice trembled. "When the source fell silent, I thought I'd lost everything. My strength, my divinity, my purpose. But when I woke, and I felt only me inside this body." She trailed off, her hand pressing lightly to her chest. "I was terrified and relieved. That's being alive," I said. Her lips curved slightly. "Then perhaps I've only begun to live." Before I could reply, a low rumble shook the floor beneath us. The torches outside flickered. We turned as one toward the horizon. A thin column of blue fire had erupted miles away, tearing upward into the sky. The guards burst through the door moments later. "Majesty!" one shouted. "The outer sanctuaries. They're awakening." Seraphine's face hardened. "That's impossible. The priests. They're trying to reignite it," I said grimly. Her eyes met mine, wide with understanding. "They mean to call the source back." I nodded. "And if they succeed?" Her jaw clenched. "Then everything we broke will rebuild itself, and this world will never know freedom again." She didn't hesitate. "Prepare my cruiser," she ordered. "We leave at once." Within an hour, we were airborne, the palace shrinking beneath us as the ship's engines roared to life. The horizon burned with strange light. The outer sanctuaries lay at the edge of the known lands, a vast desert of glass plains where the old gods had once fallen. Now that same dead land pulsed with life. The priests had gathered around an immense spire of crystal, the last fragment of the source's heart. It glowed faintly, like an ember struggling to catch flame. As we descended, the ship's sensors wailed. The energy signature was climbing fast. "They're feeding it," I said. "Sacrificing themselves." Seraphine's expression was unreadable. "Fanatics," she whispered. "They think pain is prayer." The ramp opened, wind whipping through her hair as she stepped onto the scorched sand. The priests turned as one, hundreds of them in their golden robes, their eyes burning with fervor. The high preceptor, A towering figure with a staff of radiant stone pointed toward her. "You betrayed the source," he thundered. "You severed the divine bond and doomed us all. But we will restore what you destroyed." Seraphine's voice carried like a blade through the storm. "You would bind us again to the chains that nearly consumed us." "The source was life," the preceptor cried. "Without it, we are nothing." Her gaze sharpened. "Then perhaps it is time you learn how much nothing can do." The crystal spire flared, flooding the desert with blinding light. The energy tore through the air, shaking the ground beneath us. I stumbled, shielding my face. When I looked again, I saw the preceptor dissolving into the glow, his body turning to liquid fire as the crystal absorbed him. "Seraphine," I shouted. "It's working." "No," she said, stepping forward, her armor reforming around her like a second skin. "Not while I breathe." The air around her shimmered, energy crackling against her palms. I felt the ring on my hand, a remnant of the source's spark, pulse in answer. Instinct pulled me beside her, the two of us moving as one. "Together?" she asked, voice steady even as the ground split beneath us. "Always." We raised our hands toward the spire. The world exploded in white. It wasn't light, it was memory. The source tried to reclaim us, to drag us back into its song. But this time we didn't resist it. We met it. The energy slammed into us, and the bond between us, forged, broken, reborn, flared with golden fire. I heard its voice again, desperate now. "You cannot exist without me." Seraphine's answer came sharp and clear. "Then learn to exist through us." The bond erupted. Every priest vanished in a flash of white fire, their energy scattered into the sand. The crystal shattered into 1,000 shards that hung suspended in the air before falling like rain. Tiny fragments of dead gods returning to earth. The wind howled across the plain, sweeping away the last of the glow. When it was over, we stood at the center of a crater, our armor scorched, our hands still joined. The sky above was no longer gray but streaked with faint light, dawn breaking for the first time in years. Seraphine looked up, eyes wide. "We didn't reignite it." "No," I said softly. "We replaced it." She turned to me slowly, realization dawning. "Our bond. It's spreading," I said, watching as the faint golden light rippled outward across the desert, touching the horizon. "It's rewriting the lattice. You freed them, Seraphine, but not by destroying the source. You changed it." She stared at the light, awe and fear mixing in her expression. "Then this world's future no longer belongs to gods." "No," I said, taking her hand. "It belongs to us." And for the first time, she smiled. Not as a queen, not as a vessel of power, but as someone reborn. The dawn that followed was unlike any the Vethari had ever seen. For generations, their light had come from within, the glow of the source pulsing through their cities, their bodies, their skies. But now it came from above. The true sun rose for the first time in living memory, flooding the glass plains with warmth instead of divine radiance. The light wasn't perfect or endless. It shifted, faded, and returned. It was mortal. It was real. We stood together atop the ruins of the crystal spire, the desert wind tugging at our armor. Around us, the remnants of the priesthood knelt in stunned silence, their robes scorched, their faith unraveling before their eyes. Where once the air had been thick with energy, now it hummed softly, like a great machine exhaling after eons of tension. "It's over," I said quietly. Seraphine shook her head. "No, it's beginning." She stepped forward, raising her hand toward the new sun. The light caught her features, no longer the untouchable perfection of a divine queen, but something far more fragile and alive. "They'll hate us for this," she murmured, "for taking away their certainty." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe they'll finally learn what it means to hope." She turned to me then, eyes still bright but no longer burning with power. "Hope?" she repeated softly, tasting the word. "We used to fear it. It made people question the source. Now it's all you've got," I said. Her smile was faint but real. All we have, she corrected. We spent the next days among the ruins, guiding what was left of her empire as it began to rebuild. Without the source to control them, the Vethari had to learn how to live as individuals again. Their cities flickered with uncertainty, powered by what little energy remained in their machines. But in that uncertainty, there was growth. They began to speak with one another instead of to the source. They asked questions without fear. They made mistakes and learned from them. For the first time, the Vethari began to sound human. But freedom has a cost. As days turned into weeks, the strain of the bond between Seraphine and me grew heavier. Without the source to sustain it, the connection frayed at its edges, pulling at us both. I could feel her heartbeat inside mine like an echo fading further each day. One evening, she found me on the balcony overlooking the new city, a place reborn from the ashes of its god. The air smelled of glass dust and rain. She wore no armor now, only a dark cloak that rippled in the wind. "You're leaving," I said quietly. Her expression softened. "You felt it." I nodded. "The bond's failing." She stepped closer, her gaze steady. "It isn't failing. It's ending. We created it through defiance. But the world doesn't need our defiance anymore. It needs space to breathe." I wanted to protest, but the truth was already there in my chest. The thinning thread of energy that once connected us was unraveling. The warmth that had tied us together had become a distant pulse. "So that's it?" I asked. "After everything?" She smiled faintly. "You gave my people the chance to live. You gave me the chance to be more than a god. That's not after everything, Ilir. That's everything." I swallowed hard. "What happens to you when it's gone?" Her eyes lifted to the horizon, where the first stars were beginning to emerge in the fading light. "I don't know," she admitted. "But for the first time, I want to find out." I reached for her hand, and for a moment, the bond flared weakly. One last spark, gold and fading. "You once told me I'd bound myself to something ancient," I said. "You were right. But maybe it wasn't the source. Maybe it was you." She laughed softly, the sound trembling at the edges. "You never stopped arguing with destiny." "It was never a fair fight," I said. Her gaze softened. "No. You fought with words and I fought with silence. And somehow you won." The wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of the rebuilding city below. She looked out over it with quiet pride. "If my people ever ask who ended the age of gods," she said, "I'll tell them it was a human who dared to speak. And if they ask about you, I'll tell them the truth," she said, "that their queen learned how to be small, and that it saved her." The bond pulsed again, weaker now, a single breath between worlds. I could feel her slipping away, not into death, but into something larger and softer than eternity. Her outline shimmered faintly, like heat rising from the sand. "Seraphine," I whispered. She looked at me one last time, her silver eyes filled with warmth that no divine fire had ever held. "Live well, Ilir. That's how you'll remember me." Then she was gone. Not vanished, not erased. Just gone. The way a word leaves the air once it's spoken. I don't remember how long I stood there. The city lights below flickered to life one by one, each tiny glow a defiant echo of the god they no longer needed. When I finally looked down at my hand, the ring was gone. In its place, faintly burned into my skin, was a symbol. A circle broken in two, like a sun with a shadow beside it. The Vethari called it the sign of reunion. To them, it meant the day the gods fell and the living rose. To me, it was simpler. It meant she had been real. Years later, when the first human ships returned to Vethra, they found a thriving world. Not ruled, not worshipped, but alive. The people spoke of the Queen of Dawn, who had walked among them for a time before becoming one with the stars. They spoke of the stranger she loved, who taught them to speak without fear. Sometimes, when I looked at the sky, I could almost see her there, a faint shimmer just beyond the sun's edge, watching, waiting, free. And in those moments, I understood what she'd meant that first day in the hall, when she trembled at the sound of her own language on my tongue. It hadn't been fear at all. It had been recognition, the echo of something ancient finding itself again after eons of silence. Because what she'd heard wasn't a word. It was home,